One of the big challenges that we faced at the LETF is most of these sorts of operations haven't been done in a long time since shuttle, and so that's hazardous cryogenic operations. Really, even the pace of some of these operations. At the LETF, we're running 6 days a week, 2 shifts a day, 10 hours per shift, and so having the sheer amount of trained personnel to run those sorts of operations, the right number of technicians and test conductors. And so, there's a big question of how do we get prepared for that sort of intensity, and then how do we maintain that for a year plus, which is what we've had to go do. So one of the things that we initiated right off the bat was we put senior test directors from a NASA perspective into the management chain. And so we wanted to provide some oversight, but also people with experience. And so one of our most senior NASA test managers was a former NASA tanking test director that had experience in shuttle cryogenic operations. We put him into the NASA management chain, and he provided some experience with hazardous cryogenic operations. In addition, we asked for the contractor to provide cryogenic test certs, which is let's certify who we are going to be using to do these sorts of operations, right? Let's standardize who we're going to put on console, just to make sure that we're all on the same page with what is required for these operations. We're not kind of shooting from the hip, because we had a lot of people both coming in and out during this sort of time frame, because we're actually in a contract transition as well. These sorts of things, because again, we're looking at safety of personnel and safety of hardware is really important. And on top of that, because we had such a loss coming out of shuttle of there might be only 5 people in the center that are familiar with these sorts of operations, we wanted to make sure that we all were on the same page of what skills were required. So what we did is we went to the 2 most senior people in the center, said, what are your skills that were required? And said, okay, so if we're going to accept some junior personnel, what do we think that they should know? So those were some of the things that we did for especially the very hazardous operations. But then we also standboarded those people against some of the most senior. One of the things that we have found effective is having some resident members of another team on site. And it humanizes some of the interfaces and helps us to kind of understand where people are coming from. Otherwise, right, you can have these disembodied voices on the phone, and it even from their perspective, right, they think we're maybe just cowboys just testing or something like that. And when somebody can actually look at what we're doing, the reasonable analysis we're going through, and look at, in a lot of cases, the real test configurations we're setting up, and they're like, wow, there is 25 wires and umbilicals here and things like that. And when you look at the hoses that we're connecting and things, it is not a reasonable solution to propose X, Y, or Z. And they can see it with their own eyes. They can relay that back to their team. And in a lot of cases, that person may have the actual trust of their team versus someone that they don't know. And it makes a little bit of a difference. I would not recommend large boarding parties, because I don't necessarily think that's a good use of taxpayer dollars. But in some cases, having a resident person here has made a big difference, what we found.